I mean, I'm in this like incredibly fortuitous position where I have an audience that everybody else wants. So I get a lot of inbound. And I basically have told the B2B market that I'll do anybody's show that's not a first episode, basically. So I just look at it as one-to-many selling. And it's like the most effective awareness you could get today, I think, you know?
Yeah, I've seen your content reflect that, and it's definitely directed our organization and our focus and attention. I saw your CEO's recent post as well, and you've got him, I think, on the front lines as well when it comes to posting content and getting
Yeah,
out there.
I'm trying to get everybody to do it. It's I just think it's the way the world's set up now. It's the way more and more this will be selling in the future. Like very long sort of like influencer led thought leadership that just slowly brings people down the funnel. Uh, and gives you an audience that you can do a lot of stuff with. That's my view.
I no, I tend to agree with you on that side. Have you had much pushback from your team? Because I've got clients, right? We've got the same well issue, which is what we want to push them out there, and it can be an obstacle or it's
Yeah, I think that man, it's just look, it's my company, so like what are they going to say? And it's like working so well that it's like there's no objection. But I think it just the thing that I feel so good about for our position is it just takes most people so long and like to do what I'm doing. Like it doesn't take me, 4 days a week to post on LinkedIn, but it's like most of what I do 4 days a week when you go LinkedIn plus guest slots on podcasts.
mm,
I just think that CEOs are 10 years away from thinking that that's like how they should spend their life and not on other stuff. But I'm always, it's like business is doing what no one else is doing. Right. So
mm.
as my opinion, marketing at least. So yeah, that's yeah, it's just hard because you tell someone to do it, they don't get anything back from it. They're like, it's your fault, Alex. Like, why are you telling me to do this? Like, I got so much other shit to do. I'm wasting my time and, getting 7 engagements per post on this. Like, well, I'm not willing to put in what it takes to get there. I'm not willing to be, and it just takes a long time to understand the game. It's like, to me, it's just like a startup. It takes a very long time to get product market fit. Typically, it takes a very long time to find out what content market fit means for you, or to like find your voice, right? Who's willing to put in the time? Almost no one, in my experience.
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah. I think it's it's a feedback loop, like a battle, like with anything that's got to do with sales. I think it's less daunting than actually doing sales. So I come from a background of door to door. So knocking on someone's door and getting the door slammed in your face is the highest, utmost
yeah,
rejection you can face. The feedback mechanism when you're posting online, at least you are getting a few likes and hits. But
yep,
like with anything, I guess it's down to your expectations and how fast you want the results to come from uh,
mm-hmm.
your inputs. What I would be, because I was reading a post from you about your journey and starting RB2B and retention.com. And before that, you had was it an email newsletter software? Was that it? And it wasn't going too
Yep,
well. You pivoted
exactly.
and then,
Yeah, I was just stuck at 3 million ARR. Just yeah. It was the journey of an entrepreneur who's stuck at 3 million ARR, which kind of sucks. It's really
yeah.
hard.
Yeah, I've
You
met a
know,
few of those actually.
yeah.
There seems to be a bit of a stopgap there. What so in relation to content, when you pivoted the business, did you immediately decide, oh yeah, content is going to be a big part of this, or what was the
So
transition point for that?
So yeah, so that first startup is not, so the retention.com started as a feature within that first startup, and people were using the feature, not using the rest of the email platform, downloading the file, putting it in Klaviyo and saying it was awesome. So we knew that we had to spin it out and connect it to everything else to make it
Mm,
like novel. Like originally my thought was it would grow the email marketing tool because it's
mm,
like a unique feature. but people didn't want it because it was like so far behind, and no one wants to switch email marketing tools really when it comes down to it. And then we got to a point 2 years ago where I actually like bootstrapped that super lean. Like we got to 12 million ARR with 6 people, but it was like super high churn. And, you know, we thought that we had identified an ideal customer profile that it was perfect for and it would solve the churn problem. So we stopped selling to anybody else but them. And then I viewed it as an awareness problem within that market because we had super low penetration. So I thought that building up a personal social media profile was the quickest way to generate awareness. And LinkedIn, even though there wasn't perfect overlap with the Shopify stores we were trying to reach, it was the most favorable competitive dynamic for a content creator. A lot of them were on Twitter, but Twitter's hard. It's like harder than LinkedIn.
It's insane.
Yeah. So that was kind of where it started. And then that worked pretty well. It did a lot of good for us. And then kind of like 9 months in, like, you know, it's like, was trying to take what I learned and move it over to Twitter. And it just like wasn't getting deals for us for the e-commerce side. So, but I thought I was getting really good at the content creation. And then with this consultant I have, we were like, if we pivot the content, even before we had a B2B product, it's like, what if I had one post where I talked about how our VP sales quit and like, you know, BDR, we got rid of the BDRs and we like sped up. So it's like, what if I started writing to people who were basically me and not like writing to Shopify store owners who I don't, besides being an entrepreneur, I don't have that, like I'm not feeling the same pain at the same times as them, but like in SaaS, definitely feeling the same pain at the same time. Right.
Yeah.
Like everybody was feeling that outbound thing last year. So, so yeah, literally over Labor Day, it was like one big post about BDR, all the stuff nobody was willing to say in the open, like maybe these teams don't even work anymore. And then 3 more posts, they were just monsters. Like literally like my typical post was 50 likes or whatever. These were like 3,000 each or something like that. And then I was like, wow, I know how to do this. You know, and literally after the content, it was like, oh, like, well, we should create a product that does what our D2C, our product does for e-com, but for sales teams, for revenue teams, for SaaS, right? Because this awareness mechanism is like phenomenal. There would be nothing more efficient that could ever exist than like, I like to call it edutainment, than the edutainment that I can provide to these people about my journey and my views of the future of it and like all of this stuff. So I very much, and the reason I spend all my time on it is because and this is where you're never going to get your clients to. Like I view myself in the edutainment business and I happen to sell SaaS at the bottom of the funnel. But like, I'm not competing with my competitors on SaaS and features. I'm competing with them. Where I'm killing them is my edutainment. My edutainment is so much better than any attempt. And by the way, they all try to copy it. They're like, oh, I'm working in public now too. And their working in public sucks for a lot of reasons, right? They're not good at storytelling, which is one, which they could maybe fix, but like, they're also not as credible as I am. Like, who's telling you everything that has bootstrapped 22 million ARR in 4 years and then turned around and launched another company that got conceived of 9 months ago, that got started from scratch 5 months ago, and is growing faster than any other SaaS out there. And they've put a live metrics dashboard in the public so everyone can see. And I'm telling everyone everything I'm doing along the way. If I have anything to do with SaaS, that's one of the best edutainment channels I could ever tune into.
Yeah,
right?
you're right on that. Yeah.
And because of that, it's just getting so many impressions into this edutainment world that like whatever I'm selling is gonna be great. And like in order to facilitate what that awareness would bring to us, we also did this big freemium offer so that like it's super easy and zero friction to like get started with the tool that we have, which was also disruptive in its own right. So like I just think, you know, it's like all big products, whether people realize it or not, it's equally a killer product and killer marketing in one way or another. Like, you may not even realize it's killer marketing, but like it's both. And like this is just, you know, after going through that pain with outbound in 2023, we were literally like, well, what if response rates were 0? How would you sell software? And I think it's this. It's like you'd sell it through this influencer edutainment channel, and then you would make it, you would make the market perception that it was free, so it distributed on its own, and you wouldn't need to sell it, right? Like you wouldn't need people to like push out. So that's the experiment. The churn is terrible because it's a high churn product category. It's a high churn buyer persona. PLG is high churn. It's a point solution, so we don't have multiple features. Hopefully we can reduce that over time, because if we can't, it's just going to top out at like 15 million ARR or something, but it'll be super lean. But I'm really intrigued by this new way of doing it, right? And it's very different than the venture model of just like hiring a bunch of people to do the same thing and building a bunch of features to charge more and be low churn and like whatever. But to me, it's not clear that will work, that works anymore, So, and this does, right? The problem with this is that, like you told me, you can't just go, it's kind of formulaic, like hiring a big team to do sales and marketing activities. And look, you got to build it out, but it's kind of formulaic. And this is not at all. It's very hard to explain to someone how to get to the point where all of this works. It makes sense, but it's like, what's the path there? It's like, oh man, if you want to go down that road, you are going to get bruised and beaten for a very long time. And it is going to feel so irrational to commit your time to it for the amount of time it's going to take to make it work. And you have to be so vulnerable. And I'm making posts, we laid some people off last Friday, and I'm trying to write a post about it, because it would be the most inauthentic thing for my edutainment brand to not acknowledge after laying off 40% of the staff of one of our businesses that we did. And my chief of staff is like, you're positioning this business as a company in peril. It's going to make Ann and Diana and Mike's job impossible. I'm like, that's not what that post says at all. And by the way, the reason my stuff is so good is because everyone else thinks like you. I'm positioning this as an opportunity. It's super hard to let people go. We don't know if this business should be smaller or bigger, but we're going to find out. And when you don't have product market fit, you have to get as small as possible and find a new one. And guess what? That's how you survive, right? The reason no one else can write that is because they're thinking what she's thinking, right? While everyone else in SaaS right now, with the exception of AI companies and a few other ones, they're literally dealing with exactly what I had in that situation. Everyone has fallen out of product market fit. The competitive landscape's different. No one's buying software like they were, just gave them the product market fit that they had. Their revenues got too high, so their pipeline's not outpacing churn. They would die to be able to switch to inefficiency mode, but they can't, because they raise money at these valuations that they're not, they have to keep growing, right? So anyway, that there are a lot of reasons why it is hard for people to really give the world what it wants, right? Showing that type of vulnerability, being able to write about a business that you own in an honest way because of what she's talking about, right? It's this is going to make the manager's jobs impossible. It's I think that team should know how much that business sucks, because then they would stop coming to me and saying, we should build these bullshit features for these people. It's no, take a step back, figure out if you can do larger deals, deploy 100% of your energy at that. If you can, we have a nice business. If you cannot, we have a terrible business, right? They should know that, the characteristics of the underlying market of this business are terrible. You should understand that, so that when you're spending money, you're spending it appropriately. Otherwise, they're just going to keep doing what they were doing for the last 12 months. And that's why we let people go, right? The throughput of the business is nothing like it was 12 months ago. Anyway, try writing about stuff like that as a CEO. None of your clients are going to, right? I've already told them that I'm going to post this regardless of what they say. And they're still coming to me and being like, you're putting these people in an impossible position that work for you. If we want to divest this business at some point, it's going to make it impossible. I'm like, if we want to divest this business, what's going to make it divestable is what the financials say. It's not what I write in a fucking LinkedIn post.
Yeah. Yeah, I
It's
think
like,
that's
we're going to be able to sell it if we figure out how to do bigger deals. If we don't, we're not going to be able to sell it. And by the way, if we don't, we probably need even less people. Everyone should know that. Go figure it out. Right? Like, there's no
yeah,
reason why people shouldn't know this. Like, both internally and externally, nobody can say it. No one's willing to admit it to themselves. It's just like, you know, and
man.
that, look, that's part of what makes great content, you know?
No, you're spitting
Like,
fire. Like,
people
and
can't even admit that. They can't even look in the mirror and say it, right? Like, let alone talk to their team about it, let alone talk to everyone about it. Right? And that's what, like, when you say things that connect with people so deeply because they're feeling it and no one is willing to admit it to themselves, like, that's what I think makes great content, right? Like,
a lot of the content that you're talking about there, I think the transparency that you share is the stuff that has been inspirational for me, in all honesty. So when I'm looking at some of the posts, when you're talking about the errors and judgment you've made or the directions you've decided to take, I think there's one around the payment side of things that something went wrong and you had to refund money, and that all created chaos. And for, like you said, speaking to your target audience, or let's say founder to founder, you can relate with that because you're responsible for that kind of decision making, and it's not always going right. And I think what people are sick and tired of, or where it's hard to stand out with content, is if you're not genuine, and if you feel that the only way is to talk about sunshines and rainbows all the time. And I think it's refreshing when you get someone that is there willing to bear all, as much as it is going to be quite tough for the rest of the team to bear, because not everyone is built like that. And I understand it. I understand that not only it's the fear of public speaking, right? Or the fear of, even from my perspective, when you're making calls, but online it stays there forever.
totally.
And I think that's another reason why um, people have issues with
Yeah.
it.
But,
You understand?
like, if you can do it for the reasons you're saying, you will build a tribe that is unlike any other tribe that exists in the world.
I
I
love
mean,
the perspective.
people will love you for it, right? Like, because you're the only one sharing the real shit, right? Like, you know, it's
Yeah.
in the, look, in this, as far as I can tell, like, this journey is all about, bumps in the road, getting stuck, getting unstuck. That's been my experience. I don't, everyone that I've ever spoken to gets stuck and unstuck who's in the game. And, like, if you're willing to admit when it is terrible, then you will be loved so much more when stuff works out for you again. And, like, look, that's not really what it's about for me. Like, it is a marketing. So, like, it's two things for me at this point. One
Mm.
is, it is the most incredible marketing vehicle I've ever come across. I understand why the Kardashians are billionaires now. I don't think that if I had 50 employees in marketing, they could create the same awareness for what we're doing as this one edutainment channel. And then the other one is, like, I want to evangelize. It's like a few things are happening that, like, make this idea possible. It's like the VC way has become a whole lot less effective. And so, while I believe it was unattractive and investors sort of diminished the reasons that it was unattractive, like, exits are very low probability. You're kind of an underpaid salaried man, like, as much as it doesn't feel like it the whole way. And the odds are just stacked against you. This whole thing, it enables, like, a bootstrapping of software companies that kind of wasn't possible before. It just, if you can kind of harness this, then it's like, it does what you were hiring. It does what you were taking VC money to, like, put in place to do. Helping kind of like a generation of founders realize that they should just, like, hold on to the bootstrapping ideal and, like, try to figure this out and, like, just stick with it till 10 million ARR or so. It's like, it's a whole world of possibility that opens up. So kind of using this channel as, building a religion around bootstrapping and holding on for way longer than people thought that they should, like, 10 million ARR or whatever is the ultimate goal. Like that's really motivating to me as well. It's kind of like that 4-minute mile thing. Like nobody ran a 4-minute mile till somebody did it. Like I just want to like broadcast that, like, I'm not a rocket scientist. I've just been at it for a really long time. And like probably a better way to go about it is like run profitable businesses, try to get something up and running with like, a relatively low level of ambition, relatively low degree of difficulty, aim at like 2 or 3 million ARR. Then your next one, aim a little higher. Then and like, if it's profitable, then you're funding all of this, right? Like, it's just, I think that's how business was like used to be done, but it like kind of isn't anymore, So by the way, I got to bounce on another call. Can you talk again in 1 hour to just wrap this up? Is that possible?
Yeah, for sure, man. You've been dropping bombs from the start, so it's been great just listening and absorbing the knowledge. So let's just jump straight back into it. I mean, I think the last point we was discussing was just around the journey, how long it's been for you. Because that's something that's really interesting from the content you see out there. Sometimes it's like fly by night, and obviously your business right now has been. I saw it's done 2 million in revenue, from 1 to 2 million in like a couple months, was it?
Yeah, we got 1 to 2 million ARR in 6 weeks.
That's insane.
The new one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of what this thing enables if you do everything properly. It's the first time that's happened to me, but
yeah,
it's possible.
Yeah, but I think what is interesting to hear is that you've had multiple businesses before. So how long have you been in the game? When was the first time you started?
I decided to try to pursue this in 2012 and then launched the first business in January 2014. So 10 years, 12 years,
10 years.
Depending on how you want to look at it. Long time.
Yeah. A decade in. Myself, I've been 8 years in, and you learn a lot from it.
Yeah.
I guess I think what the audience wants to know, and this is kind of getting into the nitty gritty of your product, and I guess what are the questions that salespeople like myself don't typically ask about your product that is really important for them to understand, to really be effective with it?
Well, I'm not sure what they don't ask. I do know what they do ask. They're like, what about GDPR? And I'm like, this is US only, so GDPR doesn't have any governance. And then they're like, for the most part, it's like, oh, this is so amazing, these leads, like what now? Right? Like, and
I've got a client at the moment asking that very question.
yeah. So like the way that I kind of think about it is like, like most of our audience is like kind of early stage companies. And I think we're all, to a large extent, like struggling with this lead generation thing in this new world that we find ourselves in. And like somebody said this yesterday, I think it's a good analogy. It's like setting up this, like, first of all, you need to be able to create a list of your ideal customers. If you can't do that, then that's your problem, and it's not any of the rest of this stuff, right? Like, if you don't know who your ideal customers are, then like RB2B is not going to help you, right? Like, I'll go one step further. If you have no sales motion where you can like take a qualified lead and with some effectiveness convert that into business, then that is your problem. And your problem is not getting more leads. Your problem is like, what do I do with a lead when I have it to like convert it to business? But assuming that you have some motion, what you've probably done is set up, this guy used the word a tumbler, right? A go-to-market. It's like a combination between like some outbound email and some like LinkedIn connects and LinkedIn DMs and like some ads and maybe some content you're putting out and some thought leadership ads. And like, it's not like any one of those things you can sort of measure the success of individually, but like that whole thing is kind of working, right? And what I would advise is to do nothing more than like, of the leads that we would give you, filter out the ICP leads, throw away all the rest of them, and just stick them into that tumbler, right? Like put them in the email cadences, put them in the LinkedIn Connect campaign, put them in the LinkedIn DMs. You know, if you use phones still, like by all means, enrich it to a phone number and call these people. They're super high intent. And what you will find if you do that is that your response rate and everything down the funnel from response rate will be higher, because these are just higher intent leads than your list from Apollo or whatever, right? And the other poignant detail is just like, I would not mention that you saw them on the website. That's just me. That's a preference. You don't need to. There's no reason you need to tell somebody that. You know, and a lot of people, a hesitation is like the creep factor. You know, they're like, well, isn't this going to creep people out of them, whatever? So that's the rebuttal. It's like, you don't need to tell them in the first place. They're just a warmer lead than what you have. So treat them as you would treat a warm lead and watch it work better for you. That's like kind of the advice.
Yeah. And now, I guess you've seen, I mean, you from even listening to you and hearing you speak and understanding your mindset, it sounds like you've done a lot of product development in terms of you're listening to the people who are using your product. So from that, you're mentioning this Tumblr effect, and I can see, I mean, that's kind of how we use it as well, which is looking at these as high intent leads. They need to be nurtured as soon as possible by as many mediums as you can use.
Look, that's my understanding of what sales is. You know, like as many channels as you can, as soon as possible. You know, don't overdo it, but like a message a day on 2 different channels is not that, you know. For a while, maybe it's 2 touches, maybe it's 5 touches, whatever. It's like that is what you need to do, period. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of clients that we work with, I think that sometimes it's not just the lead, like you said, it's the actual nurturing of that lead that is the bottleneck. And
Totally. Look, a lot of times it's the product, right? Like, you know, it's like, it's impossible to give a bad business good advice. Like, if what you are selling people do not want, then there's nothing you can do to help them other than to say your product is not good enough. If their product's fine and they don't know how to communicate to their prospects in a way that gets them interested in opening a conversation, that's a whole other exercise on its own as well, right? Like, and a lot of time I think, you know, it's like agencies are in a tough spot because, like, you know, you need money and like people come to you and they're like, you know, my outbound's not working. It's like, oh, well, we do that. And then it's like, the reason why is not outbound, right? It's like these other problems, right? Like, so yeah, I mean, but that's just the reality of business, right? I mean,
yeah, I think you mentioned about the old model of building big sales teams is something that may not be the future of business development. We went through that cycle of last year hiring tons of sales reps, and we understood from that experience that you can't just throw a sales rep in and expect them to achieve some sort of KPI and that's it. It's not that way. And I think what my discovery led to was that, and similar to what you said, is edutainment, right? Is that you need to arm anyone in your business with assets that will educate and provide value on the front end. And that's part of that flywheel effect that I feel like you're benefiting from because you're doing that on the front end. And that also helps on the back end when people start leveraging your product.
yeah. So I was on this webinar with the girl who runs Rippling's BDR team. So they have 125 BDRs and they're hiring, right? And like, I'm talking about this inbound led outbound thing like it's something new. And she's just like, that's just my understanding of what outbound is. And it's like, outbound and SDRs are part of a machine. And I think we had the luxury of just being able to scale the people and the messages sent and not scale the warming machine above it. And her view is that is not the world we're living in. People in marketing need to understand how to scale the warming machine above it, which the founder brand's super effective in doing because that, this is like how demand gets created, right? It's like your audience now knows about me and they go visit my website, and like now they'll be in like this cadence or whatever. But I think it's really easy to make that mistake. It's like I have one outbound rep, he's booking 5 demos a week. That means if I have 5, we'll book 25. And what that rep's really doing is just capturing the machine of warmth that you created above it. So that's why I spend 80% of my time doing this shit. And I'm on 10 guest slots a week, right? Because like we got a PLG motion. It's like the website captures it. So we don't need any people to do that. And all I'm trying to do is just get the story in front of as many people as humanly possible in this TAM. And that's what I think, it's very clearly working. It becomes difficult because once you start hiring people to try to scale it, they start trying to measure stuff and you can't really measure any part of it. Like how would I do this job better or worse? Like just being on guest slots all day? Like, I don't know. I don't know how I would rate my performance if I were working for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, I just have this gut feeling that there's a tremendous arbitrage in doing this. It's just an unbelievable amount of one-to-many selling that you can get done this way. And yeah, I mean, that's the pursuit. If you ask me how it applied to every business that was your client, man, I got no idea. Like the one thing that I'm very convicted in is that if you can find your voice on organic social media, it's the most efficient way to sell anything that's ever existed, which is, you've seen it in D2C a million times, right? These Kardashian whatevers, but like, it hasn't quite made its way to software yet,
I think that's the B2B, B2C kind of relationship. It's always first in the B2C market. It's a bit more sophisticated and it makes its way to B2B. So there's that lag.
Yeah, there's just less margin, so they have to be better, I think. Like they just have to be way more efficient to like, make it work. But the same concepts, like there's just it's so dominant. It's just the way these platforms are set up. They're just set up for people to absorb entertainment. I don't know how else to say it, right? Like you're just like a media brand, and it's like, what media brand are you choosing to be?
Yeah. Your perspective on how you view your business is not as a software business, but as an edutainment business, I think is really important for those companies that are aspiring for growth.
I just don't know how you would convince someone that it's a reasonable pursuit. It's so outrageous, right? Like if you try to go raise money on that, it's like, because you don't know how well it's going to work. You don't know when it's going to work. You don't know really what it's going to amount to at all when you start. But it's just, I think if it worked, it'd be fine. But then growth slows down, and like your investor would just be like, go do it the old way, right? Like go hire a bunch of fucking whatever. Like here, have these departments and have your little VP sales with your people, and yeah, man.
Yeah, no, I got you on that. So, any other big plans for RB2B then? So, what's the next focus? You mentioned that you're keeping it very lean.
Yeah, so we did a bunch of discovery between October and March, and it was clear that the market also we were talking to demand gen marketers because we thought they would be the actual buyer of it, and like kind of VP marketings and stuff. People actually want a traffic insights product that's not like down to the individual, but it's like, what's my traffic on a page by department or by industry or by company size so it's like ICP. So it's like by UTMs, you could look at the ICP and rank that and just see what campaigns you're running and see what SEO you're doing that's actually driving ICP traffic. So we're going to build that. I hope we ship it by the end of next quarter. We'll see. It shouldn't be that complicated. It's just figuring out what people want to look at. That is the problem.
Yeah, that is always the struggle. So what you're doing there is so what you're saying is with the content that people are publishing, finding out what is the top performing across which departments, and being able to provide that data and information into the organization. And that's where the marketers and demand gen companies are feeling that.
Yeah, because they just have Google Analytics, so they don't know who that traffic is.
Mm,
It's super aggregate, and it's not. They don't have any ICP analytics. You know,
interesting. Yeah. So,
so
so you're
that's
kind of,
that's for sure next, and that's kind of all we're focused on.
yeah. So given the kind of, you've got the micro view, which is every single person that's coming on your website now,
Mm-hmm.
and then providing a bit more of a macro on top of that so that you can
Yep.
start. Awesome. Yeah. Um, the last question I really have for you, Adam, because I know you've given me quite a bit of time here,
No
um,
problem.
is just around our audience. A lot of them rely on referrals and networking.
Yep.
You mentioned that, of course, there's a lot to it, but in terms of it's a different type of motion. But is there any, from your perspective, any words of advice that those people that are looking to start going direct without relying on channel?
Yeah. Well. By the way, I think that like LinkedIn. So you look at my LinkedIn, you're like, he's got 100,000 followers. Of course, his business is killing it. Like, there are people with far smaller followings that use the tool much more effectively than I do. Right? Like, it is the most powerful networking tool that exists in the world. What I think the content creation comes, so like what you can do is like whoever if you are like a heavy partnerships and referrals motion, and you can like get connected to all of these people who you're trying to like become partners with or whatever, and then you start producing good content, all of those people will feel like they know you over time. It's just amazing, right? And then you reach out to them, and you know you it, it's just that is the power of it, right? And like I'm doing it with such scale because I have a freemium offer, and like the
Hmm.
people that I'm doing it to live on LinkedIn and like all that stuff. But like there is still tremendous power in a following that's a tenth of what mine is. It's just much more targeted, and uh you know all of the right people are connected to you. They're all reading your shit, and they're all like, you are passively building trust in this world that you want to operate in. That is the magic of LinkedIn, in my opinion. um it's maybe not as obvious until you start talking to people and they tell you they like your stuff,
Mm.
because it's just not, you're not dropping a post and it's getting like 1,600 likes or whatever. That's pretty obvious that that's working, but it's like not necessarily obvious if every post that you drop gets 10 likes.
Mm.
um but it's magic. And you know, if these people are also content creators, and which kind of gets into like, most people are not, but like a lot of people are posting on LinkedIn. If you have if you can just get in people's comments constantly, like they will know you after a few months, and knowing you is the secret to business, right? Like, um so there's that part of it. And
Mm.
then, as far as, yeah, as far as your other question was like going direct. I mean, I think it just depends on what you're selling, right? Like,
Mm.
I literally designed this go to market motion around what the content was doing.
Mm.
um and I think it would be silly to do that before your content was doing great. I think that the much more sound strategy is like to use LinkedIn as like how everyone could use it as this networking tool. And then if you want to like start trying to use content to facilitate that networking, if you can get good at that, it's going to make the networking work a lot better, because like I said, it's just like people are slowly getting to know you and what you believe in and what you stand for, and like, just trust, right? So yeah, man. Um, you know,
Question on
yeah,
that, just a follow-up question. So you mentioned one of the things that I was quite impressed by is that you are hot on any mentions of your brand, and you mentioned your comment in there. Is that part of what you're doing as well in terms of this success you've seen? Is it just primarily because you're, like you said, you're smashing content, you've done it for a long time, you know what
yeah,
works, That's
so
working
so
for you.
there's
But
there's
are
some
you
stuff
playing that
that's
game as well?
yeah, there's some stuff that is relevant for me that I don't think is necessarily relevant for people starting off. We're in this position where people are trying to like borrow my reputation to get boost for their posts.
Mm.
I have this idea that I want to train LinkedIn into believing that's a good idea. So I'm commenting on everything because commenting really helps, right?
Mm.
Like, so yeah, but that's not going to be the case if you're just starting out. Like that's unique to having a huge audience that people are in that position that they want to uh, borrow your reputation for. I would still thank people for mentioning your brand for
Mm.
sure, right? But like it's just, I wasn't in this position 6 months ago. Like I still would have like commented on someone who mentioned RB2B if it was around.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's part of my motion, but like for instance, my motion with comments is I try to respond to almost all of the comments in my posts. I
Mm.
get 50 to 100 every post. It takes time. If I didn't, I would be in other people's comments.
That was my follow-up
Being in
question.
being in other people's comments is harder because it requires you to read their post, think of an appropriate response that's meaningful and write it. It just hurts your brain, but like, it sucks in the beginning, right? Like I'd pick a few people you really want to get close to and like just try all of their stuff. I think it's better than these AI tools because I feel like I can tell a lot of the time and it's just like, okay, I'm taking the time to respond to your comment and like you're like responding to my post in the AI tool without reading it. Like, come on, you know?
Yeah, they are quite obvious, a lot of them, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, and you're right on that. The brain capacity that it takes to read comments and comment on people's posts, it's not easy.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
almost like maybe it's easier if you just like get into that, you have half an hour a day where like that's what you do. And it's like
mm,
it's not like I'm gonna write a post and then comment. It's like I'm giving this half hour only to just like stirring it up in the comments or whatever. And that's gonna be what I do here. But yeah, look, it's the way, if you're commenting on people's stuff and they write back, like they're going to see something that you post in their feed, like that's part of the algorithm, right? Like that's the whole thing. When you're starting, you need to like get in other people's feeds. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah. I think a lot of the challenge, like you said, is there's that barrier to entry of content and posting, and it doesn't come naturally to everyone. And it's, I think, figuring out what the other mediums by which they can also be in front of people, get the
yeah,
attention, and
yeah,
figure out ways that are repeatable. Because a lot of founders as well are busy; they're time poor. So I think that's like when you mentioned 50% of your time spent on commenting or posting. It's really hard to do if
yeah.
you're doing everything, but at the same time, for yourself, you're an example of that, how it can be so beneficial for the company. And in terms of marketing spend, advertising spend that you'd have had to spend to get that kind of reach, I mean, that's an investment in itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting spent in different ways. Like I've these really expensive consultants, and I'm spending a lot on video because I'm like producing a docuseries. I'm not even sure what it's doing, but like I'm spending on it. Chris Walker has comparable reach. He hardly spends anything. He's been in the game
Mm.
for a lot longer than me. But yeah, it's you know but I'm trying to be the best, so I'm trying to work with the best people and I'm trying to put out the best shit. And, most of the time they're not cheap, you know?
They're not cheap, and it takes, I feel like a certain mindset. Like it seems like you're very conscious of what you're doing. Maybe it's because you've been in business so long and you've had a few different companies, but it's a hell of a risk also to bring on expensive consultants, and you're taking a creative standpoint, which again isn't so measurable. From a
None of it's measurable. It's very weird.
Yeah.
Again, it's like the way I think the future is going to play out, but like, there's not a playbook,
Mm.
that's what makes me feel good about it. It just feels like not a lot of CEOs are going to be out there doing what I'm doing with my week.
Mm.
Right. Like, so yeah.
Awesome to hear, Adam. And I definitely learned a lot from just this conversation itself. So thank you for that.
Hey man,
Um,
no problem.
Yeah, and I'll continue to recommend your solution. I just noticed you got an agency page as well. Didn't even realize that.
Yeah,
So
we have an agency page. We need to
fine.
make it a lot better. We're getting our website like redone right now. So, when it gets done, we're going to have a better agency page and have some like featured agencies and stuff like that.
I
So
was going I was going to say, because you mentioned about stickability, right, and decreasing churn, and one of the, I guess, reasons or factors for churn is that they're just not leveraging the product as best as they could because of the things you mentioned, right? If they don't have the function already internally, then they need to build it, because it's not just
right.
about installing the software.
Yeah, that's a major problem.
Mm.
Major problem.
But you've got this symbiosis with agencies. So,
Yep. Big time.
yeah, cool. Okay, Adam.
Cool,
Well,
man.
a pleasure. Thank you again, Adam. Much appreciated. And I'll be in your comments uh,
Awesome.
and keeping on top of your content and posting. And yeah, I look forward to keeping in touch.
Sweet, man. Thanks for the time, Alex.